You've tuned in to the 49ers Rush podcast, and here is your host, John Chapman.
All right, welcome to another episode of the 49ers Rush podcast, and we are going to keep going. This is going to be our cornerbacks episode and breakdown where you're going to find out who's in, who makes a 53-man roster, salary cap and contract breakdown of all of the players, and who are going to be the future stars, those need-to-know names, and who's going to bring us into the future. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So again, we are continuing with our 2 episodes a week as we continuing breaking down this 53-man roster. And again, if you haven't already followed me on Twitter, go ahead and do so, JL_Chapman, JL_CHAPMAN. This is where I post videos and content and just kind of goes visual with all of the audio that you get from here, and it pairs up very nicely, so go check us out there. And without further ado, let's jump into this. Now, last year, the 49ers kept 5 corners on their roster, and I have them keeping 6. And there's a lot of reasons why, and as we get into these players, why we are keeping this extra person here, it makes sense as we continue. Now, do understand that I counted Jimmy Ward as a safety, and so if you want to hear that, the safety one is the previous episode. I did quarterbacks before that, so you can go back and listen to those if you want to. Now, there are a few locks, and we're going to go through each one of these individually. Again, I have them keeping 6 corners, and the first one that is an absolute lock is Richard Sherman. The absolute mega blockbuster free agent deal taking away our biggest rival, an outspoken critic in division and all that stuff, and he is with us now. He is 30 years old and will be at the start of the season, and so we're gonna explain a lot about his play. Even though we've seen it, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page and exactly what the expectations and what we're getting from Richard Sherman. Now, he is 30 years old, but again, he is the prototypical corner in this system, 6'3", 195 pounds, and he has played 7 straight years out of Stanford. And little interesting note, he graduated, his senior year was Harbaugh's last year at Stanford, so the connections to the San Fran area definitely there. I mean, he went to college there for 5 years, all that kind of stuff. Now, here's what's interesting, and again, pay attention to this 6'3", 195. You're going to continue to hear very similar measurements as we go through this. And probably the best news of this entire episode is that the cornerback position was our major weakness, namely the secondary position in general, safeties included. It was our biggest glaring need, that and pass rush. And a lot of that had to do with Dontae Johnson, who was our number 1 corner last year. He had the most snaps by over 150 snaps over any other 49er. We're going to talk bad about Dontae Johnson for a little bit, but one thing that we can say, he was tough. And he played through a lot of injuries and whatnot, but man, he was terrible. So that's 1,000 snaps that are gone that we are hoping Richard Sherman steps into, and there's no doubt in our mind, it doesn't matter if Richard Sherman was 40, this will be a major improvement. So Dontae Johnson, who is long gone again, he was the number 118th rated corner by Pro Football Focus and had the 6th worst coverage grade of any cornerback that took a snap in the entire year. And that's over 200 plus corners. I think it came out to around 230, 240. I got tired of counting. But it just shows you how terrible he was. He was so targeted. Teams picked on him. It was kind of their game plan. Now, let's get back to Sherman. Sherman had 5 straight seasons of playing all 16 games before he ruptured his Achilles tendon halfway through the season last year. So durability is not an issue with him at all. He plays very, very tough and physical, and we're going to talk about that. But the problem is this. I don't think it is a problem. The national media kind of talked about this, and why would you pay him all this money? He signed a 3-year, $39 million contract, and he's 30 years old. He plays corner, coming off a major injury. Why would you sign him to this deal? Now, the interesting thing is this. He negotiated the terms of his own contract. And if you don't know anything about Richard Sherman, the guy is absolutely a genius. Again, I've said before on this podcast, I was speaking with one of the corners who asked me to leave his name off, and he said, Richard Sherman knows more about football than any coach I have ever been with. And that's college, high school, all the way through the process. He knows more about football than any person I've ever been around. he went and he learned contracts and all this kind of stuff because he wanted to do this himself. And once the deals came out of the contract, the media totally shifted, and they went from, holy cow, Sherman fleeced the 49ers to, man, what was Sherman doing? And here's what Sherman was doing. He's betting on himself. He wanted to get maximum value for what he thinks he can do, and he wanted this contract to be incentive to him for what he could do as well. So in order to get the full $39 million in this contract, these are the things. He has to do all of these things. He has to play in 48 games over the next 3 years. He has to play a total of 90% of the total defensive snaps. He has to make the Pro Bowl all 3 years. And he has to make the All-Pro team all 3 years. He has never done that in 3 straight years in his career. He did make the Pro Bowl from 2013 to 2016, and he made the All-Pro team 2012, 13, and 14, but those didn't overlap to meet those criteria. And so you got to throw again, I've talked about how our financial guy is just an absolute dominating force that is able to construct these contracts in a way that brings about the highest possible ceiling payday for the player, but protects the 49ers in a way that if you're not playing at this top level, then it's kind of going to be what it's going to be. Like, we are going to protect the team first, and that's just kind of what's here. And again, Richard Sherman negotiated this, so he believes in it. Now, the cap hits on, and this is probably the most significant factor. This year, Richard Sherman cost $6.1 million, but let's say things don't work out. He only costs $2 million against the cap next year and $1 million against the cap in 2020 in a doomsday situation. Now, I'm hoping Richard Sherman hits every one of these qualifiers because that means he's playing top-level defense for the 49ers for 3 straight years. But if, for some reason, things go south and it just doesn't work out, this is a 3-year, $9 million deal for the 49ers in worst-case scenario. Best case, he gets paid all that money, and it's a lot, 3 years, $39 million. He's going to average $13 million a year, but we're getting what we're paying for with this deal. Now let's focus on his play. In 2017, his play, here's the deal. The strengths, we're going to go through the strengths and weaknesses for every single corner that makes this roster. He is a physical, smart, long, and competitive corner. That is what you get with Richard Sherman on a long time. And with almost every single corner that is not just a slot guy, long is very, very important. Now, the weakness of him is his age. He is 30 years old. He is aging. And his speed. He ran a 4.5 4.40, which isn't great, but for his height's pretty good. But that was 7 years ago. So he's definitely slowed. But the great thing is, and you could say this with corners and you can say this with wide receivers, there are your speed corners and then there are your physical corners. In the same way with wide receivers. Somebody like an Anquan Bolden. Anquan Bolden was never fast. He was physical and he was a technique guy. And because of that, he was able to prolong his career. You could say the same thing about Larry Fitzgerald. Like, he was never one of those top speed guys. He was quick, but he was a technician, and he's great at physicality and at the catch point and all those things. This allows players like Sherman to elongate their career because he's never won with speed. That's not who he was. And so he doesn't have to change his game. It transfers well with age. He was rated as the number 33 cornerback by Pro Football Focus last year. Now, it was his lowest rating of his career, but barely. He's put up 7 straight years with an 82.5 rating or better on Pro Football Focus, and all of those are beyond starter numbers. He was the number 2 cornerback against the run. Again, this goes back to his physical play style. He is like an outside linebacker whenever it comes to the run game. You will never see him get beat outside. That's just not what he does. He is a boundary corner at every single play. He is the last guy on the outside, and you don't get outside of him. Now, and another thing, too, with you hear the number 33 rated cornerback, and you kind of go, that's not elite. But again, you got to look at corners. Corners are very different because each team has 3 starting cornerbacks that are out there every single play. It's not the old days where you just had 2. There are usually at least 3 wide receivers out there every time, and if not, you'll even put your corner on top of a tight end or a fullback. So there are, if you do that for 32 teams, there's 96 corners that start every single week in the NFL. So this is a very deep position. He finished ahead of people like Patrick Peterson, Xavier Rhodes, Janoris Jenkins, Tremaine Johnson, just to name a few. So if you are in that top tier, man, the cornerback position is so valuable, especially in this defense. We have to have these long, lean outside corners. So let's go to our second guy that is absolute lock, Ahkello Witherspoon. He's only 23 years old. He was our rookie last year. He is 6'2", 195. So again, pay attention to these measurements. 6'3", 195 was Richard Sherman. 6'2", 195 is Witherspoon. We have a type, and we are sticking to it. Now, his salary, he's still on his rookie deal, and he's a third-round pick, so we have him for 3 years left. He counts $800,000 this year, $1 million against the cap next year, and $1.2 in the last year of his rookie deal in 2020, so super cheap. His play, if we break it down, his strength, he has two main things. He is long, and he is beyond athletic. Again, he's a soccer player is kind of his background. And it's funny because, in soccer, you can't use your hands. And this is how he plays, because the weaknesses, he doesn't like contact. He doesn't like to hit. He does not like to kind of deliver a blow. And you won't see him get lots of pass interference penalties. In fact, he had none, because he doesn't use his hands. He is a shadow corner that is long and gets his hands on the ball. He actually does really, really well with that. But so his weaknesses are he doesn't like contact and experience. He came in for week 5 right after the Rashard Robinson trade when we sent him to the Jets. And he started from there on out. He didn't get one snap the first 4 weeks. And again, he was raw, and we knew that coming in after we drafted him. And so they let him sit for 4 weeks, and then they realized, man, Robinson's terrible. These penalties are terrible. We can't keep doing this. And he is night and day difference from Rashard Robinson and how he plays. If you remember how many penalties, gosh, man, Robinson just accumulated those like crazy. So he comes in week 5, and he only had 28 tackles. Again, that shows you he's not a guy that's going to come up and hit a lot. But he did have 2 interceptions and 7 passes defense. That is legit. 1 forced fumble. He only had 2 penalties the whole year, 2 defensive holding penalties, and one of those was declined. So really, technically, man, you start that many games and you only get 1 penalty as a starting corner in the NFL. That's unreal. And it's a testament not only to his athleticism, but his feet are incredible. He is a long mirror match corner. He's not that press guy like Sherman who's going to get his hands all over you. He is a guy that you can't shake him. And he's long enough that he's going to defend any pass that comes your way. So we've got this one super physical long guy on one side, and on the other one we have one long super athletic guy. So it's very interesting the way we have our outside corners set up. And, man, this defense, it is long. All the way across the linebackers, D-line, we have height and we have crazy long arms. And that makes it difficult because you've got to be able to throw a perfect pass in a lot of these situations. Now let's move into our slot guy, and this is the one guy that kind of doesn't fit the mold. Usually your slot guy, your nickel corner, is shorter and shiftier. And Kwan Williams, he is an absolute lock. They signed him to an extension last year. He's 27 years old. He comes in at 5'9", weighs 185 pounds, out of Pitt. And, man, he was by far one of my favorite 49ers last year. I just absolutely love the way he played. The strengths to his game, he is like glue. He does not give up separation to anybody. Now, if you're going to make a picture-perfect slant catch over the middle on 3rd and 4, he's going to be all over you, and it's going to have to be a perfect pass and a perfect catch because he's going to be close there. And another strength that he has no clue how small he is, which kind of leads into the weakness, and that's durability. He's had 3 straight years without playing all 16 games because, man, he is a mean little guy in there, and he will come in and lay some wood because he doesn't care, and he plays all out every single play. He kind of fits, and whenever they signed him to the extension, they even said, like, he fits what we want the 49ers to be. Just tough and just makes plays. He had 42 tackles, 1 interception, 5 passes defense with 2 forced fumbles, and only 1 defensive holding call all year. Again, back-to-back guys in our secondary that are not getting penalties. We do not want to give away first downs, and the coaching staff is purposefully getting rid of people like Rashard Robinson, who has a very high ceiling as a corner, but if you're making dumb penalties and making it harder on our defense, we have no room for you here. He rated as the number 44 cornerback by Pro Football Focus, and it's just solid across the board. Run game, coverage, pass defense, point of contact. He is just solid all the way across the board. And we got him at a great deal. He signed a 3-year, $8.8 million extension last year. He counts $2.2 million against the cap this year, $2.6 next year, $3.2 in 2020. So we have a very cheap economic option here at safety, but the 49ers wanted depth, and they addressed that big time in this draft. So, and I'll talk about that with the next two guys, not this one here, but let's talk about Tarvarius Moore. 21 years old, we drafted in the 3rd round, 6'2", 200 pounds, out of Southern Miss. Now, the weird thing here is he played safety, and he only played 1 year. He was a JUCO transfer from Pear River Community College, isn't that fun to say, to Southern Miss, and he only started 1 year. But this kid has unreal. He's a Madden created character. He is long, he is fast as all get out, and he is very, very mean. Loves contact, and he played that single high safety and strong safety role. He would switch back and forth. Now, the weakness is he's super raw. His feet need major, major help, and he's never played corner. And so he's playing corner, and that's where he played all of OTAs. We drafted him in the 3rd round. At the very end of the 3rd round with the 31st pick, or number 95 overall. So again, you're seeing somebody as a top 100 level talent coming out of the draft. And I mean, he put up great numbers, 87 tackles, 3 interceptions, and 12 pass breakups in just 1 year starting Southern Miss. And you watch his film, holy cow. You see a very fluid, natural athlete, very, very clean back pedal. Now, we'll have to see how that changes to a shuffle and a press corner, but his hips are unreal. And he's one of those guys that's just real smooth, calm, and collected, and he looks like he's playing against middle schoolers. He's so tall and big. Like, he is built. And so, like, it's just weird seeing him out there. It's just like, that's not fair. He's bigger than everybody else. He's faster than everybody else. He's longer than everybody else. Why is this happening? But he's just smooth. So he's like a glider, and you wouldn't have guessed how fast he is. But again, this kid ran back-to-back 4.32 40s at his pro day. That's just unreal. Now, his footwork needs a lot of help. He's a hopper. What I mean by that is whenever he doesn't know what the play is doing, you can kind of see the wheel spinning in his head, and he just hops both feet until he decides what to do. And you never want to hop. You want your feet to operate independently of each other, so when you need to make a cut or a decision, you can go. If you try to make a decision when your feet are up in the air, that's when your feet get out of your frame, and that just breaks down everything. So he's very, very raw. And his speed helped him out a lot. That it would kind of bail him out, and he won't be able to do that at the next level. Again, I talked about his pro day. Listen to these percentages as far as cornerbacks in the NFL. So this is comparing him to corners. Back-to-back 4.32 40s. That puts him in the top 99%. That means he is the 1% in the entire NFL as far as speed goes. He ran a 2.5-second 20-yard split time, so that first half. So that means he gets up to top speed quick, 99%. Again, he's in the top 1% there. Broad jump, 133 inches or 10 feet 11 inches. He's in the top 97%. That's where he is. Vertical, 38.5-inch vertical at that height. Unreal. Top 85%. So long, lean, and fast. Lynch said, this is the quote after they drafted him. He said, "We know he can play safety, but we want to try him at corner." Because again, and all of, as far as positional values in the NFL go, you have quarterback by itself. After that, you have pass rusher by itself. And then the next tier is offensive tackles and cornerbacks. And then after that, there's a huge drop-off between everything else. And if you look at the money, the cornerback position is the 3rd highest paid in the NFL, and this reflects that. So safety is not that high, but that's the idea. We know we can play safety, and we can put him there if we need to, but with his elite athletic traits, and he talked about his 40 times. This is, again, John Lynch talking. I'm summarizing here. One of the best things that safety can do is play corner. And then he told a story about Herm Edwards made Lynch play corner for Tampa Bay, not because he wanted him to take snaps at corner, but he thought that it would make him a better safety. And so worst case scenario here is this doesn't work out at corner, and we will transition him over to safety. And he could play either. He's fast enough, he could play the single high, and he's strong enough that he could play the strong safety. But again, the valuable position here is outside corner. And it basically it seems like they're trying to do, he is being groomed to be the eventual replacement for Richard Sherman in 2 to 3 years. And if it doesn't work out there, then he'll be safety. So lots of options there. The last lock that we have, or that I have, is DJ Reed, who, man, he's a fun kid. 5'9", 188 pounds out of Kansas State. He's only 21 years old, very, very young. And he is, the strengths to his game, shifty, quick, and explosive. He is, man, if you want to watch the most fun film, it's probably DJ Reed out of these rookies. He's fun to watch. The weaknesses, he's super short, but he does have long arms, which helps make up for that some. And he doesn't have a clear defined role. He's kind of like one of those jack of all trades, ace of none. But he is a football player, pure and simple. You just got to get him out there on the field. Now, we drafted him in the 5th round with the 142nd pick overall, so 5th round picks make the roster. Like, he's going to have a role. He's going to be a special team starter for every single special teams group, and then he's just going to have to carve out a role. Where that's going to be, don't know. He's taking snaps at outside corner, slot corner, nickel corner, free safety. I mean, the kid they're trying to find a spot because his film is just so fun. And on top of that, he's a punt returner and a kick returner. Last year, he ran back a punt and a kickoff for a touchdown in the same year, which is very, very difficult to do. So we are just adding to our list of possible returners. Probably the top 3 guys that we're going to have, punt returner, Dante Pettis, Trent Taylor, DJ Reed, and they could all return both kicks and kickoffs. I think Breida will be back there on kickoff return as well. But just adding these dynamic playmakers that have versatility and will just have to find their spot. That's just kind of what this is. So his film, man, you watch his film again, I already said it's exciting. He is the definition of cat-like quickness. Change of direction is his specialty. Now, he's a gamer too. That's the thing. Like, if you just watch his highlights, you don't get a feel for the game. And I've said this before on here, I believe. Watching somebody's highlights is like reading a dating profile. You're not getting who that person really is. If you watch game film, that's like talking to the ex and say, tell me the good and bad about this, because the film don't lie. And they're not going to make it butter you up or anything like that. And when you watch the film of DJ Reed, man, 3rd down, this kid shines. Big moments, big games, he's going to make the play. And I said it earlier, he's just a pure football player. I'm very excited. I just don't see where he's going to play outside of an injury creating this opportunity for him. Again, he was a 2-year starter at Kansas State, 7 career interceptions, 25 passes defensed. That's impressive, and 3 forced fumbles. So those are kind of my locks. Again, just go back. We got Richard Sherman, Ahkello Witherspoon, Quan Williams, Tarvarius Moore, and DJ Reed. Those guys are the locks. Now, this is my one maybe, because this last spot, who knows how it could go. And I got Tarvarius McFadden, undrafted free agent out of Florida State. He's 21 years old, 6'2", 204. I got him making the roster. I only have 2 undrafted free agents making my 53-man projected roster. The other one I talked about last episode, if you didn't listen, Terrell Williams, safety, undrafted free agent out of the University of Houston. Go back and listen to that one if you want to hear about him. But I got McFadden making it. Now, the strengths for him, man, ideal height and a playmaker. Again, 6'2", 204. All of our outside corners are 6'2" or taller. And if McFadden could have came out after his sophomore year, he probably would have been a 2nd or 3rd round pick. But, man, his speed or lack of speed started to show on film, showed at the combine, and it destroyed his draft stock. So his weakness is speed, his strength is height and playmaking, and, again, he fell to undrafted, which is just crazy. He was probably the most sought-after undrafted free agent that there was. There were about 3 dudes that were kind of the big stars, like, holy cow, they're not drafted. and he was one of them. And because of that, he received a $20,000 signing bonus, which most rookies do not get that. Maybe about 5 in the entire NFL get this much money. And so because of that, it just shows you the 49ers wanted this guy. I had a 6th-round grade on him in my draft profile just because he was very, very raw. Again, he ran a 4.67 40, and that just destroyed whatever value he had. That's in the bottom 5% of corners in this league. But the things that you can't take away from him is his height, his athleticism, and in 2016, a year ago, he led the entire nation in interceptions. So you have height, he's very, very physical, and ball skills, which is just unreal. But what the weirdest thing about it, he goes from leading the entire nation in interceptions to getting 0 interceptions in 2017. Now, a lot of that was just teams weren't targeting him, but what they learned is you can beat him deep. It's just, man, if there's a route that is kind of that 8, like slant routes, hitch routes, out routes, things like that, he can jump on those. But he just couldn't keep up top-end speed. Again, very physical at the line of scrimmage, which helped made up for his bad footwork and his low speed. And his ball skills are legit. He's just not a great tackler. He looks at the ground too much or arm tackles, which is crazy with his body frame because he is, I mean, the dude's rocked up. But he's got to clean those things up. But the ceiling for him is just too high because he did it, for Florida State in the ACC at some top-level competition, and he hung with the best of them. He's just a little slow. So I do have him making the roster, but he's got to change the way he plays. Now, the corners that are left out, these are the 2 guys that are fighting for a spot, but I don't have them making the roster. Greg Mabin, he made our roster late in the year after some injuries. He's 24, 6'1", 200 pounds, out of Iowa. He played in 6 games for us last year, but only had 44 combined snaps, more of a special teams guy. And then the other one, he's kind of a dark horse to make this roster. Emmanuel Mosley, 22, he's 5'11", he's 22 years old, 5'11", 184 pounds, undrafted free agent out of Tennessee, and is a great athlete. Ran a 4.42 at his pro day, very mean, very physical, loves to hit, but he gives up a lot of space in man coverage. Very, very tight hips. So those are the 2 guys that I have outside looking in. Now, if we look at all this, so we've got 6 corners making the roster, but here's what's crazy. The NFL average for amount spent at the cornerback position is $18 million total per team per year. We are 24th, so we're in that very bottom kind of quarter, and we only spend $11.5 million this year. And a lot of that's a testament to the young guys that we have and all of that stuff. It's just $11.5 million against our cap this year. 4 teams are spending over $28 million by themselves: the Texans, Jets, Jags, and Ravens. So again, just to summarize real quick, I have Richard Sherman, Ahkello Witherspoon, Kwan Williams, Tarvarius Moore, DJ Reed, and Tarvarius McFadden making the roster. So if you haven't already, we're going to keep doing this. We got linebackers coming up next, which I'm super excited about. I played linebacker myself, so I get a little excited. But if you hadn't hit subscribe, just type in 49ers into wherever you get your podcast, and we are the first one to pull up. Just hit subscribe to 49ers Rush Podcast so you don't miss any other ones. And stay strong, faithful.